Okay, so picture this. You just got a raise, maybe a good one. And the first thing everyone tells you, your parents, your coworkers, that one uncle at Thanksgiving, is put it into a house. Buy a home. Stop throwing money away on rent. Build equity. That's the responsible thing to do, right? That's what adults do. Here's the thing though. The people who actually end up wealthy, like generationally wealthy, not nice car and a boat wealthy, a huge number of them are not doing that. And it's not because they can't afford a house. Some of them could buy the house in cash without blinking. They just don't. Or if they do, the house is basically the least interesting thing in their financial life. It's almost an afterthought. And I want to sit with that for a second, because it's genuinely strange when you think about it. We've been taught since basically birth that home ownership equals financial success. The starter home, then the bigger home, then maybe a vacation home. That's the ladder, that's the dream. So why would the people who are best at building wealth be the ones skipping rungs on that ladder, or climbing a completely different one? Look, I'm going to explain what's actually going on, because once you see it, you cannot unsee it. And by the end of this, you're going to understand a concept that private wealth managers use with their clients constantly, but almost nobody explains to regular people, probably because it doesn't sell mortgages. So let's start with the uncomfortable scenario. You buy a house. Let's say it's $400,000. You put 20% down, that's 80 grand of your own money, and you finance the rest. Congratulations, you're a homeowner. Everyone claps. But here's what nobody tells you at the closing table. You didn't just buy an asset. You bought a giant, expensive, immobile object that now owns a piece of you too. Property taxes, insurance, maintenance. A roof doesn't fix itself, a furnace doesn't last forever, and all of that money, every dollar of it, is money that is not going anywhere else. It's not compounding in the stock market. It's not funding a business. It's sitting inside drywall and shingles.
Now here's a number that should genuinely bother you. For a huge portion of middle-class Americans, their home is not just a large chunk of their net worth. For many, it's the majority of it. Federal Reserve survey data on household finances has shown for years that primary residences make up the single biggest asset category for most middle-class families, often outweighing retirement accounts, stocks, and savings combined. Sounds fine on paper, except that means their entire financial future is riding on one illiquid, undiversified, geographically fixed asset. Imagine if a financial advisor told you, hey, I want you to put 60–70% of your entire net worth into one single stock, in one single industry, in one single city, and you can't sell even a portion of it without selling the whole thing. You'd fire that advisor on the spot. But that's exactly what a heavily mortgaged primary residence does to most people's balance sheets, and we call it the responsible choice. So what do wealthy people actually do instead? Here's the reveal, and it's simpler than you'd expect, but it flips the whole homeownership script upside down. Rich people don't avoid real estate. That's the misconception. They avoid owning real estate the way the middle class owns it. The difference is leverage. And I don't mean leverage like using a mortgage. I mean leverage as a strategy, as a tool they point in a completely different direction. Think of your house like a boulder. It's heavy, it's solid, it sits there. If it goes up in value, great, but you can't easily chip pieces off of it to use elsewhere. You'd have to sell the whole boulder, or borrow against it and pay interest to unlock a sliver of it. Wealthy investors, on the other hand, treat assets more like water. They want things that can move, that can be split, reallocated, borrowed against cheaply, and put to work in multiple places at once. So instead of parking a giant pile of cash into one house they'll live in for 30 years, they use a completely different formula. It's sometimes called other people's money, or OPM, and it works roughly like this.
Instead of buying one house with cash, or with the standard 20% down, they'll use leverage to control multiple properties, or better yet, multiple income-producing assets, using the smallest amount of their own capital possible. Same total dollars, wildly different structure. Let's say instead of one $400,000 house, someone puts down that same $80,000 as a 20% down payment on a rental property. Then they take another $80,000 and put a down payment on a second one. Suddenly they don't own one appreciating asset, they own multiple. Multiple properties appreciating, multiple properties generating rental income, multiple sets of tax advantages. The bank's money is doing the heavy lifting, not just theirs. And here's the part that really messes with people's heads the first time they understand it. Because of how mortgage interest, depreciation, and property expenses work in most tax codes. A rental property can generate real cash flow into an investor's pocket every single month, while on paper, for tax purposes, it can show a loss. That's not a myth or a loophole in the shady sense. It's literally built into the system because governments want to incentivize housing investment, which means real estate investors are frequently paying less in taxes proportionally than a W-2 employee earning the same income, while simultaneously collecting rent checks and watching the asset appreciate. Meanwhile, the family who bought their one primary residence gets none of that. No rental income, no landlord tax benefits, and property taxes that only ever go up. So the reveal is this. It's not that rich people think houses are bad investments. It's that they refuse to let a house be their only investment, or their most illiquid one, or the one place where all their leverage is spent. The primary residence, if they even buy one instead of renting long-term, is often treated almost like a lifestyle expense, not a wealth-building tool. The actual wealth building happens somewhere else entirely. Income-producing real estate, business ownership, equity markets. Sometimes all three stack together, using borrowed capital strategically instead of hoarding it in one place.
There's a phrase for this you'll hear in wealthier financial circles: good debt versus bad debt. Most people only ever think about debt as one thing, scary, to be avoided, paid off as fast as possible. But there's a real distinction. Bad debt is money you borrow to buy something that loses value and generates no income. Think consumer debt, most car loans, credit cards. Good debt is money you borrow to acquire something that either produces income or appreciates faster than the cost of the debt itself. A mortgage on a rental property that cash flows positive every month while the property appreciates is functionally good debt. It's other people's money working for you while you sleep. A mortgage on the house you personally live in that generates zero income and just slowly drains money into taxes, insurance, and repairs? That's neutral at best, and depending on the market, it can behave a lot more like a liability dressed up as an asset. Now, I want to be really clear about something, because I don't want this to come across as renting is always better or never buy a home, because that's not the point. And honestly, the internet is full of oversimplified takes like that. The point is about sequencing and mindset. The middle-class version of the American dream says, save up, buy the biggest house you can afford, and consider that the finish line. The wealth-building version flips it. Keep your personal living situation lean and flexible for as long as possible, and pour your leverage and capital into assets that pay you, not assets that cost you. Some wealthy people do eventually buy a large personal home, but by the time they do, it's usually paid for with cash flow generated by the other assets, not by draining their primary savings and taking on the biggest mortgage a bank will approve them for. There's also a psychological trap buried in all of this, and I think it's honestly the more important half of the conversation. Buying a home hits something emotional in us. It feels like stability. It feels like I made it. There's a certain identity wrapped up in home ownership that our culture has been reinforcing for decades, through tax policy, through marketing, through literally every movie that ends with a white picket fence. And look, there is real non-financial value in having a stable home for your family. I'm not dismissing that. But the danger is when that emotional pull gets mistaken for financial strategy, when people stretch themselves to the absolute limit of what a bank will lend them, convincing themselves it's an investment, when really it's an emotional purchase wearing an investment costume. Wealthy investors tend to separate those two decisions. Where do I want to live, emotionally and practically? That's one decision. Where do I want my capital working the hardest? That's a completely separate decision. And it's almost never in the walls of my own house.
So here's what you can actually do with this, because I don't want to just leave you with a mind-blown feeling and no action steps. First, if you're currently deciding whether to buy a home, separate the emotional decision from the financial one. On paper, literally. Write down what owning gives you emotionally: stability, roots, control over your space, instead of by default. Second, if you already own a home, look into how much equity is sitting dead inside it. Home equity is one of the most expensive things to hold and one of the cheapest things to borrow against, relatively speaking, which is exactly the imbalance wealthy investors exploit. A HELOC, or a cash-out refinance used to acquire an income-producing asset, is a completely different move than using it to fund a vacation. Same tool, opposite outcomes. Third, and this is the mindset shift more than the tactic, start asking of every dollar you have, is this dollar working for me, or am I working to protect this dollar? A dollar sitting in home equity is a dollar you are protecting. A dollar in a cash-flowing asset is a dollar that's protecting you back. The real takeaway here isn't don't buy a house. It's that the house was never supposed to be the whole plan. It was supposed to be one piece, at most, of a much bigger structure. Somewhere along the way, an entire generation got sold the idea that the piece was the whole puzzle. And the people who quietly built real wealth just never bought into that version of the story. So if there's one thing to take from this video, let it be this. Stop asking, how do I afford a house? And start asking, how do I build a system where a house is something I can afford easily because everything else is already working? That's the actual shift. That's the thing nobody puts on a real estate billboard. If this made you rethink something you assumed was just common sense, that's exactly the point of this channel. Taking the obvious financial advice everyone repeats and actually checking if it holds up. Subscribe if you want more of that, and I'll see you in the next one.